Hello, good afternoon. It must be 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday because it's me, Jeff White, introducing you to another teissTalk. We're live every Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at 4 p.m. My co-host Jenny Radcliffe takes on the Tuesday 4 p.m. slot. I do the Thursday 4 p.m. slot. And we're getting through all of the key issues in tech security in our teissTalk season, which just started. Well, I think we're in week 2 now. Welcome back. If you've joined us before, to our regulars, really good to see you again. I'm sure we'll hear from you in the chat. And if you are new to us, please do say hello. If you're new and you say hello, you win a free teissTalk mug. It's that simple. And we're that desperate. No, we're not really. Also, if you want to win a teissTalk mug and you're not new, please do pop in some stuff in the chat, pop in your thoughts. We're going to be talking today about developing an incident response playbook for critical third-party suppliers, which of course has become massively more important for people since SolarWinds and Kaseya and various others. So we're going to be talking all about that issue. We're really keen to hear from you in this session. I want to hear about your incident response playbooks. I want to hear tips you've got. Have you been reviewing them the past year? How's that gone? Have you got any extra money? Have you been reviewing your supplier contracts? We want to hear all of your experiences because we are as interested in what you guys are doing as we are in what our panelists are talking about as well. Speaking of which, we've got a fantastic panel joining us for this one. As we usually do, we have Carl Knowles, who's Global Head of Cyber and CISO at HFW. And of course, David Petty, Cyber Specialist at OpenText, who are going to be joining us a bit later on. For the moment, I want to welcome our first guest, who is Head of Information Security at Guardian News and Media, Styliana Simeonova, who's joining us from wherever she is joining us from. I will ask that in a second when she takes to the screen. Hi, Styliana, how are you?
Hey, everyone. It's all right. It's a nice afternoon today. So
Good.
Looking forward to having an interesting conversation.
Indeed. Are you London-based or?
Yeah, I'm London-based, Southeast London. Quite sunny today, so can't complain, really.
It is. For those of us watching, for those of you joining us from London, it's quite a sunny day today, so we're kind of enjoying that, the tail end of our winter. And Guardian News and Media, I should declare an interest. I have done bits and bobs for Guardian, for the Guardian itself, but also I've talked tech and done some tech stuff for the Guardian. And you guys seem very sort of switched on for this kind of stuff. I mean, certainly you're the only newspaper that I've ever done a cybersecurity presentation for. Do you feel that? Do you feel that the Guardian's sort of been ahead of the game in terms of tech security generally compared to other papers?
Yeah, I think that the teams are pretty switched on. To be honest, probably the most security-aware organization I worked for so far, which was quite a nice surprise to find. Obviously, this is an area that everyone wants to improve on, and there is always a room to improve on. But as a whole, the organization is security aware, and we have really good tech reporters and obviously good tech contributors. So, yeah. How much
of that do you think is a legacy of working on things like the Edward Snowden leaks? Because obviously that was in terms of cybersecurity, that was a challenging thing to work on. Do you think that pushed the organization a bit further into that?
That definitely had its impact on the organization. Quite significant impact. A lot of security practices around operational security were brought in during that time and have evolved over time as well. So the focus, and obviously in the recent days with Pegasus, again, have a focus on operational security. So definitely this type of work is constantly requires attention and evolution.
Yeah. And so that's presumably part of your role as well, protecting the journalists and how they deal with sources, as well as protecting the rest of the organization.
This is part of a job in terms of preparation. We do have significant Chinese walls between journalistic side of the business and the commercial side of the business. But as a security team, we do support journalists in their preparation and to ensure that the awareness levels and the decision making has a stable ground. They could make their own decision. They're familiar with the tools available, and they're comfortable operating in different environments. So the focus is always on risk assessment, basically.
Yeah, really interesting. One of the journalists at The Guardian, Ewan McCaskill, who I think is defense reporter still, we did a mobile phone interception demo and he got quite interested in that. So he came into Guardian Towers in King's Cross to do a little demonstration talk for the staff, and loads of people turned up. It was really, really good. But I have to admit, hacking people's phones in the Guardian was a slightly troubling endeavor. Well, obviously we had all of the permissions and we talked about what we were doing, but it was a really good session to kind of talk to people about phone security and Wi-Fi security. That's my
these
experience.
types of exercises always bring a crowd together, and you always have people flooding in. Even now, virtually, when we do something interesting, people will join and attend.
Yes, joys of working for one of the large organisations. That's good. Folks, if you've got questions, by the way, for Stiliana or for any of our panellists, do pop them in the chat. We've had one pop in already, and we will try and get around to your questions as much as we can. Actually, Stuart's asked a question. Let's just deal with this before we go on, if we can, Stiliana. How has tech journalism changed due to the flood of breaches, 0 days, nation-state attacks? How do you prioritise the stories? It's probably one more for the journalists than for you, but is there a sense of how that works?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, our security team doesn't influence really the reporting side of it. So the prioritization of news stays with the journalistic teams and the editorial desks, definitely. But I'm always amazed when working with journalists how quickly they adapt their workflows to enable ingestion of massive load of news and kind of staying always on top of what's coming next, and being able to triage everything and follow on the story as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, that's not the case in every newsroom. I've worked in a number of newsrooms that I won't name, but certainly quite a few of them, notably one in particular, really struggled to deal with large amounts of information. Whenever we got one of these big hacks, it would take us usually a day or two just to try and get the information, find a computer that could deal with that quantity of information. And even the screens, I remember you have to have a really big screen to read some of this information on, and we just didn't have we had to get a bigger screen. I sort of looked up the road to the Guardian at the King's Cross and thought, yeah, I bet they've got a big screen there. I bet they're having no trouble dealing with this. Good. So listen, let's move on to the topic in hand. I'm sure we'll return to the media side of it at some stage. But just in terms of this, so we're talking about incident response and third-party suppliers. We have talked a lot about, by the way, third-party stuff before. So if you go back to the teissTalks, the old episodes, there's a lot of stuff in it. But one of the key things that's come up is the extent to which you know who all your third-party suppliers are, and you know what your agreements are with them, even before you get on to incident response. Stiliana, for you, has that been clear? Has that been audited? Can you get your hands very quickly on records of who your third parties are and what their posture is?
To be honest, this is a continuous battle for us. And I think that a lot of organizations will probably relate to what we are experiencing. A lot has been said about cloud sprawl. And I think that managing relationship with third parties has a lot to do with this as well. We have a huge adoption of cloud services, ranging from infrastructure as a service to SaaS services. And some of these providers, they have their marketplaces. People attempted to use third-party services just because they're available. So the governance piece around use of technology is a continuous focus for us and continues to develop. Just identifying even third-party relationships sometimes is not easy. In the last, I would say, since the pandemic, third-party relationships have become quite an important focal point for us, just because of the increase in risk. And our main battle was prioritizing, because the sheer volume of relationship and the volume of the network is quite significant. And obviously every security team, regardless how big or small it is, will be always restricted in number of people that they could dedicate to governance or to due diligence. So prioritization for us has been an important part. And having said that, we have developed an internal criteria for prioritization, which takes into account different factors, ranging from just business or service prioritization from the operational side to exposure and information classification. So I think that this has helped a lot to focus. Mapping out relationships and dependencies has been a challenging task, and propagation of prioritization as well.
Yeah.
But prioritization has helped us to focus effort and
Obviously, we're talking particularly here about incident response. If something goes wrong with one of your suppliers who's supplying you with this bit of kit or that bit of software, traditionally, are those incident response plans and the proposals and what happens in those circumstances, is that generally mapped out as part of the beginning when you take somebody on to supply that bit of kit, or does it evolve over time? Have you got time to implement it and then go, okay, well, now we'll work out the incident response afterwards?
For us, we've adopted as part of the standard contractual process, we do set out clear requirements for incident response. So as a set baseline, we ensure that we can respond if we deal with data breach. We ensure that we kind of fit in and are able to meet our compliance requirements.
Right.
But we also bake in requirements around direct communication lines and just first line of response. When it comes to, I was talking about prioritization of vendors because this is driving also the priority around incident response. So for, let's say, highly critical vendors and service providers, we tend to maintain close relationships. So we do tend to proactively maintain our communication channels and ensure that we have up-to-date contact lists. At least that when something wrong happens, you will not scramble to search for contact information to start with.
Yeah.
So this is the first piece that we can ensure that is in place for critical vendors.
And who are you? For you, I'm trying to second guess what your answer might be to this in The Guardian. The critical thing, presumably, is for you to stay online, frankly, for the website to stay up. So I'm presuming your most critical bunch are going to be the sort of the publishing technology side. Is that correct?
That is correct. Also, cloud distribution networks and so CDN parts, general service vendors. Obviously, these types of services are critical for us just to ensure that we stay online. And as you know, there was a outage from Fastly recently, which loads of companies were impacted on. So this is probably the most recent supply chain event that we kind of got close to and needed to invoke some incident response procedures.
Yeah. Well, let's have a quick look. This has been in the news recently. There's a quite an interesting piece from Reuters had a good exclusive on this, which I think we could put a link into the chat, which was in the wake of the SolarWinds hell. I think we can describe it as fiasco, whatever you call it. This is the SEC in the US, the Securities and Exchange Commission, who've basically been writing to companies and saying, look, you need to tell us about in quotes, any other data breach or ransomware attack since October 2019, obviously since the potential that these companies have downloaded the compromised version, the bugged version of SolarWinds, the SolarWinds software. But it's quite ambiguous in this article as to whether the stuff that those companies have to be reporting is definitely linked to SolarWinds and the problems from SolarWinds, or whether it looks a bit like a fishing trip. I mean, obviously this is in the US, Stiliana, but I just wondered what you made of this. It seemed to be quite a bold move in terms of a regulator saying, come on, you have to confess, you have to fess up.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold move, and this is a move that we've kind of been worrying for a long period of time, because the regulatory framework, obviously in UK and Europe, is is slightly different, and although data breaches are reportable to ICO, we still have a choice, let's say, to deal with other breaches the way we decide. But such phishing exercises is worrying, and it will be interesting to see how different regulatory bodies will respond, and how the regulatory framework will shift in time. In fair honesty, I think that with the chances I will be touching on this during our conversation, but such push for disclosure already exists from insurers, for example. Right. So when you renew cyber insurance, the insurer will inquiry about data breaches and significant security incidents. So these types of information or requests for such type of information is these requests will be more prominent, I would expect, in the future.
But it's interesting. It sort of, for me, it makes sense that an insured want to ask that, because, you know, if your house has been burgled 5 times and you come to renew your home insurance, they would probably want to know that. So it strikes me as interesting that the insurers, logical, the insurers would want to know it. But it's interesting. I mean, handing it over to a government department, I think that was part of the issue. Some of the people who spoke to Reuters for that article were saying the issue they had was handing it over to the government. It's like, well, what's going to happen with this information, and where will it end up? And insurer, I think you can be fairly confident it'll keep it confidential. But a government, there seems to be this concern that, you know, this information might make it out further, or it might be a grounds to make it compulsory to declare this stuff. Would you feel different having to declare everything to the ICO versus having to declare everything to your insurer, for example?
Yeah, definitely. Well, coming from the Guardian, reporting to governance and government bodies is or sharing information with them for us has been an interesting element over the years. So, concerns in the light of also Snowden revelations, obviously, and other whistleblowers. I think there is a concern to what extent these inquiries are healthy and helpful for the wider ecosystem and internet as a whole.
Yeah. I'm going to bring in our panelists in a second, but I just want to, there's one question that Stuart's asked, which I think is quite interesting, which crosses that divide, which I know you're trying to keep quite separate between journalists and the sort of cybersecurity corporate side. But it is interesting. The question is, with the rise in cyber attacks on journalist devices with tools like Pegasus from NSO Group, do you have playbooks for that type of supplier incident which could land on your infrastructure from their devices? So it's interesting. Your supplier in that case might sort of almost be WhatsApp on a journalist's devices. Does that feed into your instant response playbook?
It does feed. It does fit in the instant response playbook. It does fit more on the forensic side. To be honest, advanced persistent threats similar to Pegasus are really hard to detect, and providing they use zero-click exploits and zero-day exploits as a whole. It is extremely hard to detect and protect, but we do have kind of processes to validate or to forensically inspect devices if we have slight suspicion that they might be compromised, and search for indicators of compromise. This is the best we can do, and compartmentalize devices for different purposes is usually the operational model, just because it's really hard.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And actually, Stuart's picked up on my point about insurers and confidentiality. He says insurers getting attacked for their client list and the amount the clients are insured for, and then the clients are attacked and ransomed limited to their insurance. You're right, yes, Stuart, insurers are not necessarily confidential all the time and hang on to the information confidentially all the time. Interesting stuff. Thank you for that, Stiliana. Stay with us because I'm going to introduce our other panelists as well. We're going to join us on this. We've got Carl Knowles, who's Global Head of Cyber and CISO for HFW, friend of the show, and also David Petty, another friend of the show, cyber specialist from Open Text. Welcome to you both. Good stuff. I just want to pick up on, I'll come to you first on this, Carl. We talked with Stiliana a little bit there about this auditing process that goes on first before you even get to the incident response stuff. How's that gone for you? In the wake of SolarWinds, I imagine there's been a great deal of activity. Have you discovered new things about who your suppliers were or their posture, what their posture is?
Yes, actually we have. And hello, everybody. I'm Carl. I'm the head of cyber for Holman Fenwick Willing, HFW. We're a global sector law firm based out in London, but we're also global with around 20 offices, 600 lawyers and other staff. So, yes, you may have seen something on the news or some articles around barristers' chambers being breached. There have been a number of breaches recently, 4 New Square, 3 VB, and Gately. And that has obviously affected us, and it's given us a bit of a nudge to start looking at more about our playbook in terms of response. And actually, it's also given the Bar Council a bit of a push as well. We've, traditionally barristers' chambers are small organisations without dedicated security functions. In fact, not even many have dedicated IT functions. That's outsourced. So, you could arguably say they're not at Cyber Essentials or to any kind of standard. So, I
mean, sometimes sometimes barristers can just be sort of 4 barristers who've got together and formed a little, unit themselves. It could be a four-person band, as it were.
Absolutely. And we all know that the attackers will always go to the weakest link in the chain. It's like the old adage of running away from a bear, isn't it? You're only as fast as the slower person, so to speak, as long as you beat the other person. But that's the way it is, and they've been targeted, and it's been quite a push for us to start looking more at our kind of program management from the top. So we're talking about not only we're talking about governance, right? We're talking about training and awareness. We're talking about how we procurement. We're just going through a procurement project at the moment where we're making sure that we're focusing more on the due diligence that we've not really done before, and really starting to get into the kind of risk assessment phases as well. I think it was briefly mentioned earlier on, and I really feel for Stiliana on this, because we feel this as well, is that understanding your kind of supplier, I guess, map is a real struggle. Understanding that, and then understanding in terms of criticality amongst those suppliers as well. I mean, barristers' chambers were a Sleepy Hollow up until a few months ago. All of a sudden, now they've been breached a few times. Actually, do you know what? We really need to step up, and the Law Society and the Bar Council are now working together to sort of strengthen them. And that's just one small facet of. Yeah.
But let's stay with that, Carl. If we can stay with you on that for a second, because it's interesting. Some of the companies Stiliana's talking to will be large organisations, and when you say, "Look, this is our incident response idea, this is what we want from you, could you give us this, could you give us that?" Yeah, possibly 24-hour on-call number. That's maybe okay for larger suppliers who are used to that, but turning around to barristers' chambers, how's that gone, that conversation of like, look, if you get popped, here's what we're going to do and what we want, with a small organisation like a barristers' chambers? How's that conversation gone?
Well, to be quite honest, we've tried to step away from that conversation and allow the Law Society and the Bar Council to have those conversations. And what you've got to be aware of is there's going to be hundreds of law firms that are going to be pouncing on top of these chambers. And if we're talking 3 or 4 people, it's going to become very difficult. So we've got to be careful about the way we do it. Now, the fact is they are going to need some hand holding more so. and there'll be some other, examples of third parties that will, of such sizes that will need some hand holding, and I think going back to the point of cyber insurance, we briefly brought it up before, but this is kind of the space that you want to help them with, to have some kind of incident response, a retainer in place or something like that to help them. Now, when it does happen, from the examples I've seen, they've got incident response organizations in, they've helped them, they've worked with them, we've worked with them in terms of, from our perspective, and let's be honest, our perspective, we were helping them on the fact that we wanted to know, whether our stuff had been taken or seen. The bottom line is that we have to work with them, and I think the Law Society understands that now, that you can't just have all the law firms around the table. You must have these other areas as well. So that's just one example.
Interesting stuff. Thanks for that, Carl. David, just by the way, quickly for folks who don't know OpenText, just give us the brief overview of OpenText and what the company does.
Oh, absolutely. OpenText is a multinational, large software company with professional services as well in the cybersecurity space. I run the business development group for the security division of OpenText. We have about 15,000 employees and operate in more than 50 countries. So that's who we are.
Good stuff. Well, yes, good overview in one sentence. And in terms of, so that's interesting. Where do you sit in terms of this, incident response plan type stuff? Are you advising your clients on it? In this conversation, where are you at? Where's OpenText at?
Yeah, we have a broad spectrum of offerings that we provide. You've got people, process, and technology. We provide staff aug, we provide process consulting, and we certainly provide technology. To be candid, 90% of my time is focused on providing the technology to customers to help solve some of these issues that come up. One of the things that strikes me is I think that it's ironic that all of the crown jewels and frankly, all the big companies in the world get bound up and get sent to a law firm. It's very, very common. And I say crown jewels, I mean the valuable items, the data that is important, because it's typically that's what's involved in a lawsuit. And that's what the organizations are looking at day to day. And the law firms are very effective at keeping things quiet. And I think that quite often I can speak to situations in the United States that have occurred where breaches have occurred, sometimes small. It could be one laptop, sometimes large. The law firms will not divulge that, except in a very, very tight circle, because quite often they don't have to. And so as a result, I think that this topic that we're talking about today is very topical. I think that third-party vendor risk assessments need to be more pervasive in the mid-market. They're not pervasive in the mid-market. And when they are, they're frankly not done in depth. I've worked with one of the largest banks in America and seen the way they do it. And frankly, no one outside of the biggest companies in the world can actually support a really effective third-party risk assessment because it's too expensive. And I think eventually someone needs to provide a cloud environment designed for, I'm going to call it these mid-sized companies, that is secure in the same way governments have secure cloud environments for their own type of work, because it just doesn't scale. You can't bring the amount of resources in and still be commercially competitive that are needed to fight Pegasus, for example. It's just, it's very difficult.
Just David, staying with you then on that, because I was interested in your point earlier about, law firms maybe not declaring, losses that they've had. How then do you feel, going back to that news article in Reuters, let's talk a bit more about that, because, that is a government regulator stepping in and saying, no, you need to tell us about these incidents now. Do you think that actually could be helpful in terms of surfacing this and make it more visible?
I think disclosure in general is a good thing. But frankly, law firms play by a different set of rules and requirements and fiduciary duty to their clients. And it's a difficult balance. I'm not qualified to really comment on that, except that I'm 100% confident, as I am here on planet Earth, that there's not enough security going into law firms' overall efforts. I mean, if a law firm has 600 attorneys, I'll betcha they don't spend the type of investment in the security side that they do on their staffing for lawyers. And I think we all know that intuitively. We just recognize that because it's a difficult environment we're in. I mean, a lot of the nation state APT tools are becoming available to less than nation state actors. And that creates an incredible challenge for someone that is tasked with securing a network of 5,000 employees, for example. It's a big challenge. And I just to reiterate what I said before, I really think that third-party risk incident response plans for third parties they are not being done outside of the largest companies, the IBMs, Deloitte & Touche's, the big banks, that sort of thing. I don't think it's really being done effectively. And I think that we should all do our part to try and help them figure out a way to solve that beast that is there. How many of them have actually mapped persistent IP connections to a vendor? It's crazy. I worked on a project like that a while back. It's just absolutely crazy trying to map everything across. You get lost in there for years. And but I don't know. I hope that helps the conversation.
It's interesting. Thank you, David. Stiliana, I want to come back to you quickly, picking up on something that Carl said, which was talking to smaller organizations. Obviously, some of your suppliers at The Guardian are going to be massive organizations, but some of them are going to be smaller. How have you gone about sort of tailoring, your incident response demands and plans to a smaller supplier?
I think that Carl mentioned something quite valuable, and we definitely experienced that in our work with smaller vendors. We do a lot of hand-holding, and it does take time, but we do believe that the investment of time on both sides is actually justifiable in this respect. So if for us the service is critical and we really want to work with this small company and help them and they help us, then it's mutual effort to bring both sides to a comfortable position. So we do a lot of hand holding. We do our due diligence process is actually it doesn't sit necessarily only in information security. We are interdisciplinary team, which includes procurement specialists, legal advisory, and DPO office as well. So we look at the due diligence process from different perspectives, and all these groups, they do tend to help the smaller third party to the extent possible, obviously without going into a conflict of interest and providing advice that we can't advise.
That's interesting. Can I come back to you on that then, David? Because it's interesting. Obviously, Stiliana's talked about The Guardian, and it's really wise to have your tech team in with the compliance team and the DPO and the lawyers and procurement people. But how common is that picture where, taking on suppliers involves all those different parts? Is that a usual procedure or not?
Yeah. But I think we've seen a sort of a yo-yo rebound back and forth where 2 years ago, a small organization with 10 employees would get a 50-page questionnaire as a third-party risk assessor. And they'd look around and they'd find some 17-year-old kid that used a computer once and try and get him to work on it. My point is it just didn't match the security expertise of the organization. So one size fits all just does not work. And I've seen that happen quite a bit where it just doesn't make sense. I can't emphasize enough. I think that there's an opportunity to help mid-sized companies by providing, two-tiered consulting for smaller organizations that need help with this sort of thing. Where large companies like Deloitte, IBM, PwC should be able to provide consultants, but on a reasonable model to help provide some guiding expertise for these mid-sized organizations. Because it's a conflict of interest for Stiliana to send her staff in to the company that provides air conditioning services to The Guardian. She doesn't have the time to have her staff go there and spend a day talking to them. Whereas that organization should be able to spend $400 an hour for 8 hours of an overview for someone from Deloitte & Touche as an independent person to come in and just help them figure things out. That is a reasonable amount of money for any organization to pay that is providing serious services. It's a challenge.
True. But then, they wouldn't mind paying that, I suspect, if they got one certificate that they could then take to lots of different people and say, look, we had Deloitte in. By the way, other auditors are available from Deloitte. If they could take that certificate and say, right, we've got it now, we can use that here, you can use that there. What they don't want to do is have to do that process of consultancy time and time again, I suspect.
For everyone. Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, but I have to say that it's better than nothing. It's a lot better than nothing. And frankly, what's happening quite often is just nothing, or someone without the expertise is answering the questions. Classic example, I was consulting on a project years ago with someone that had, I said, well, hey, what about MDM? What do you got? He's like, oh yeah, I got it. It's over there. It's not plugged in, but I got it. That's plugged in. I can tell you today, it's still not plugged in.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to be. You get the answer to the question you ask. That's traditionally the. Yeah. Can I wonder if I'm going to ask our teissTalk, who lurks around in the background and helps us putting in the links there. If we can do a poll. I don't know whether poll. I think I seem to remember a poll is possible on our current platform. We're going to ask our teissTalk if we can get a poll running. Oh yes, a little thing for polls. That's fine. I think I would love to do a poll. I would love to find out from our viewers. In the wake of SolarWinds, has your incident response plan improved or not? That would be the poll I'd like to do. So let's see if we can get our teissTalk to do that. Has your incident response plan improved since SolarWinds? And let's see if we can get a poll running. Go teissTalk. Carl, yeah, it's interesting. We mentioned insurers recently. I want to come back to insurers because they drive quite a lot of this. In your experience, do insurers have a view on incident response stuff? Is this something that they get involved with, and do they drive the conversation much?
They do very much indeed. Actually, hang on, I've just got this question in front of me.
Yes, you need to answer the question, unfortunately, to clear that off the screen.
Yeah. Okay, so quickly, let's just answer that question. Right, that question's answered. I just wanted to quickly go back in terms of the small bit of paper, the certification for everybody to go around and said, okay, so I just want to say IASME does that. Within obviously UK, and also Cyber Essentials, which is just a few £100, and that's what we're pushing the chambers to do, is to go Cyber Essentials, because actually if you are Cyber Essentials, yes, it's a questionnaire and you have to fill it in, and it's self-certified, but actually it does give a degree of kind of of confidence that they are looking at it and they've got things in place, and also encouraging through NCSC the 10 steps and stuff like that, but which isn't certified, but Cyber Essentials is, and as we know, Cyber Essentials is something that you need if you want to pitch for any sort of government work. So the insurers question, right? So yes, so the insurers are getting really kind of really nitty, aren't they, into their questions, and they are, it is really bad at the moment. It's really changed just in this 1 year. When I remember reviewing ours just after the lockdown started around kind of May last year, and it being actually relatively comfortable and easy. I was working with our insurance partner. And, not too many sort of hard-hitting questions, very sort of generic, nice and easy. I've had worse client assessments, to be quite honest. And then this year happened, and this additional ransomware only questionnaire come up. Oh, interesting. And all of a sudden, it was a case of last year we didn't have a fully functioning disaster recovery plan, the IT team. This year, it was like, wow, unless you've got that, we're halving your cover.
Whoa.
Because disaster recovery is so important for ransomware, and this is the point. Now they are getting very choosy. They are getting, they are really wanting to dig down into what you're doing. So you've got to be very careful with cyber insurance now. Not something that you can blag, not something that you can just get in place. But for smaller organisations, it sounds like I'm pitching here, doesn't it, for Cyber Essentials? But you actually get a small amount. I think it's if your annual earnings are under £20 million, you get free cyber insurance if you're Cyber Essentials. So again, that is something that can help.
Good plug.
It's kind of a plug there. I think it's that anyway. I might be wrong exactly what the figure is, but they definitely get the insurance cover as offered. But yeah, they have certainly got they've sharpened their pencil, so to speak.
Interesting. Unfortunately, obviously, as a way above £20 million business, I wouldn't be able to apply for that myself. But let's see our poll. In the wake of SolarWinds, has your incident response plan improved? 58% said yes, 42% said no. So it's pretty tight. Although we haven't really defined what improved means, but you know what I mean. You get the idea.
Jeff, I think it's alert fatigue. There have been so many things like SolarWinds that people are just, these things are happening every 6 months and the pace seems to be quickening. There was one several days ago with regard to supplier, I believe US-based Fortinet, 87,000 passwords and logins that came out. And I mean, that's a classic example of third-party risk, that the risk is in your vendor. And that stuff is going to keep happening more and more. And one of the things that I'm seeing out amongst the market is that these vendors, these third-party vendors are saying, geez, we better fix our house because we're supposedly protecting their house, but maybe our house isn't as clean as it could be. Well, and so we're having a lot of conversations like that.
I'm glad, David, you brought that up, because you raised the interesting point when we were chatting about this in preparation for this panel about the idea that security vendors are potentially, security vendors are obviously a supplier, and also they have a key way into your organization. And if they get popped, a security vendor needs in turn almost another security, maybe not a vendor, but somebody else to come in. And
they all to some degree have an in-house staff that does their internal operational security. Very often those groups are subject to serious auditing as part of a third-party risk, but not from the mid-markets. When a big bank comes in and says, we're going to bring in security vendor X, oftentimes there'll be a very in-depth, frankly, sometimes it's source code review. Good luck with that. But that stuff happens sometimes. But the point is that there's a lot of in-depth work that happens from the part of the big companies, but nothing at all from the mid-market. And frankly, I smile because one big law firm has more risky material than one of these Fortune 100 customers quite often. And the risk level is just the amount of oversight. I mean, banking, accounting, oversight, compliance, all this stuff, they're really into that. Much more so than the law firms who have an incredible amount of value inside their organizations.
Yeah, interesting. Stiliana, can I come to you and pick up on something Carl was talking about, the ransomware, insurance and ransomware? Have you had that experience as well of the insurance companies saying, right, here's a separate ransomware questionnaire?
Yeah, this is quite fresh with us, actually.
Sorry to bring us up. Sorry to bring up uncomfortable memories.
No, it's that year has been a struggle, and the message that is coming from the insurer is, unless you demonstrate best of breed security, including, so Carl talked about backup and restore procedures, but unless you can demonstrate that, plus demonstrate that you have a comprehensive and extensive detection program with almost 100% coverage of your estate, your insurance is gone. And obviously, things that we could relatively comfortably demonstrate previously have been challenged this year with a lot of additional questions, including operational details that we've only seen so far from internal compliance checks when it comes to control compliance. Configuration of Active Directory, service accounts, so very, very detailed questions around configuration of infrastructure and justification of this, why you have so many service accounts and are they really running with the lowest possible privilege level?
So they're really getting their hands into the detail of this, aren't they?
So I think that in this respect, we see now ransomware, but we're talking about third-party and supply chain risk management. I think that this is still to come. We've seen definitely increase in scrutiny around the supply chain management from the insurer, but I think we will see more next year probably because of the increase of supply chain incidents this year. And that's not going to be something that is on downward spiral. It will be.
upwards. Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, really interesting conversation. The insurance stuff just keeps running and running. Actually, Scott Wilson's commented, if cyber insurance isn't already broken, it soon will be. The bigger players have already moved out of the market. So it's interesting stuff. Listen, folks, we are unfortunately out of time, so I'm going to thank all of our panelists, folks, who've been absolutely great. We have had Stiliana Sielmanova, Head of InfoSec at The Guardian News and Media, Carl Knowles, Global Head of Cyber and CISO at HFW, and of course, David Petty, Cyber Specialist at OpenText. Thanks to you all. We're back. Jenny's back on Tuesday next week at 4 with cyber resilience and business logic attacks. She's got Edward Van Andel, who's advisor and hacker and CEO at Zerocopter, along with other speakers as well. So do tune in at 4. I'll be back on Thursday at 4 with another topic. Thank you to all our panelists. Thanks to the attendees. Have a great rest of the week and a good weekend. We'll see you again soon. Cheers all.
See you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.